Craig Dworkin. Gosh, I'm excited to see what he's going to do tonight. It's all new work. Last year, he was astonishing. He's going to be astonishing tonight, I'm sure. Craig is the author of over a half dozen books of poetry, even though poetry's dead. I don't know why he's still doing it, including the Perverse Library, Motes, I'm sorry, my eyes are bad. Motes, excuse me, The Crystal Test. His work has been shown this year at the Whitney Museum, the ICA in Boston, and Whitechapel Gallery, with a film currently screening at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver. Recent poems of his have appeared in Poetry Magazine, 1913, a Journal of Forms, Bomb Magazine, and have been selected for inclusion in the new Norton Anthology of Postmodern Poetry. Oh, hot damn. A critical book on media theory is forthcoming next month from MIT Press. Please welcome Craig Dworkin.
Thank you. Thanks, Joel. Thanks to you all for coming. So I'm going to read about half or a third of what's a really long poem. So just know that there's a really juicy part in the middle that you're not going to hear. But you'll want to rush out when it's published and find out how our heroes get from point A to point B. It's called The Falls. The streets, the falls, the truths, the gifts, the gavels, the coming down, the first part, the winters, the nights, the grifts and runnels where the strewn leaves fleet as they leisurely spin in a lazy rotation, the slip downstream of debris before logging, submerging and instantly plummeting, the sinks and leads, the leads and pattern, an articulation of movement, the closed vista falls into the camp of enclosure, the previous prospects, the cast to the ground, the planes away to the distance vision's limits strain. The dregs of the ebb, the drain quick suck through chameleon sand, the pervious screen of coarse sand and water-worn stones. Into place, out of fashion, out of favor, from grace into line. The engraved, the names in their cases, heavy rain and a sudden passing. The tributary branches and leaves, the obligation falls to, the debts fall due, la chance oblige. The flaws, the rifts, the slips, the stricken faults. The pulse as blanched leaves tribute the stream from their bows, suggests a strict, unpredictable pattern. The distributed spread, the parabola's concavity, the cadavre par le bras, the dead, the wind, the free, the randomness of dice as they fall. Whole flocks of leaves panic at the breeze, skimming the pavement with a scraped escape. Some trees, even unheard, unseemly, beseech. But the puppet is graceful because its limbs are what they should be, lifeless, mere pendula, and they follow the laws of pure gravity. The pull at the cheeks as the lips turn down, the protruding pout at the sudden conclusion, the check of the pall, all the manifold catastrophes, the point of fracture or collapse, the moment of capsize, breaking waves, changes of state, melting from solids, flocks from a colloid, aggregate stages to precipitation, from high humidity, from a coating to a drop, bead to a drip, the slip from waking to sleep. Each limit of a system follow exactly the same mathematical model, as when suddenly all rivers are downstream. The balance on the verge, from the lip to the cusp, over the crest, down the bifurcated fold to the saddle of the buckle. At any point, a plunge could fall further. The rest depends on the sibilant difference between a fall and a kiss, baiser, baiser, on the meaningless coincidence, the chance event, the lacking logic, on an empty accident, devoid and useless, the confusion of casus with casus. In the same way, chance descends from caedere to fall with its unexpected reorientation given over to gravity and motion beyond our control. And that random, repeated link between falling and chance finds its rendezvous again in the French chanceler, to falter, to look as if one's about to stumble, to tumble, to slip of the memory, to fail. And yet again, in German, the sheer coincidence plays out. Zufall, chance, fallen, to drop, Vala, a trap, a bed, what one falls into, in love, sleep. A lost night's rest is not a catastrophe. The empty, the hollow, the dead, the free. Compared to the person I love, the universe seems poor and empty. This universe isn't risked since it's not perishable. Carnal love, because not sheltered from thieves or vicissitudes, is greater than divine love. It risks me and the one I love. It hazards. To aim at a mark, to wager, to guess, we're always falling. But sometimes we forget, and because there's motion, there must be emptiness, yielding, and accident. Atoms plummet through an infinite void. They rain straight down, perfectly vertical, with only occasional swerves. As when, on some September night, in the air, you can feel the end of something and the beginning of something else. A peripeteia, a recognized crisis, a clinamen points in the drama with a sudden reversal. A trauma serves to plot the path to which the warp is at any moment wefted, along the lines of termination of the web, formed by the last weft thread driven up by delay. Just as each beautiful day is also a meteor, se estrella las estrellas. Until the moment of collision, some portion of unforeseen motion partitions the distance remaining. The tea leaves, the cake crumbs, the sound of a bell, the smell of fallen leaves, the chips as they may. With blue caerulea stewed as a potion, catenach, asteraceae, blooms in the brew. Infusions are taken as slope-speeding sleep. The sugars dissolve, the dyes diffuse, the time embitters as it steeps. The blossoming losses accrue. A slid and the lanched, the wrench of the branched clastic carpels and catch, the remembered scent, the density, the dance, the scant difference, the rests and accidentals, the remains, the reminders, the wrong hands, the scent note, en son de cloche, anneau de la fille, the sialagog trigger, the Pavlovian pucker, the slaver, the sleek and the rigor, the perfect fit, tongue and groove of tenoning ends, the saprons, the runes, the reens and excretions, the ubiquitous beat of droplets that breed by absorption, then the filming. The surfaces swell against tension, the ratio of dynes over area now approaching 900, and the surfactant spreading, then the wash from the let-go, the let-down, the overflow, the astonishing applanate end of dispersion, the clasping, the clapping, the paragrels mesh, the pelting and fell, from the grasp through the fingers to the floor, from the chymophonous surface undated, more slowly to the rim of the deeps. Sweet, of a fair color, thin skin, clean faltered from Haines. The ocular scale, the Damoclean hang of anger at age, the skin petals, a phlogic belly, the deciduous tissues. With each thrust, the breasts, dependent, adhere to the wave laws of liquids. Spine-arched, head twisted back, seeking a cataglottic clasp, baiser, she pauses. A certain amount of slip, in short, is necessary in order to obtain the thrust. Particles of rust dye the difference, ferruginous, entropic, between the pitch of a propeller and the distance it moves through the ambient medium in one revolution. The lacrimal salivus, hydrotic in mixture, and the colloquated apocrine corpus in externate fluxure diffuses and flushed to an organless flow. The catamenial charge charts calendrical measure. The perspirant matter sudates, transuding. The mucinous bed against friction, the darkening swell, the dusk of the tissue, the soak and the sponge and the seep in the pool. A lubricant sleeves the lips down over lips. The slowly sapped and lactescent mucus, the mescaline musk, the de-escalation, the semen, the increased risk, the ceasing, increasing cementation of the sheets, the sheen of the salt sweat, the sluicing to thighs. Carefully powdered and carelessly pulvered, now ruined or washed out in runs. The streaks down the dustins and facings, the finish made spoil, the foundations veering in sheets from the stress, the silt of mascara in mirrored out vistas, the vistal distress of every false sheer veneering, ejaculate and splatter the length of her back. Calligraphy's minims, its strict cancellations, its blurring and tinting and careful gradations. The real character of these lines is apparent when the crystalline constitution of each grain is considered. They are not cracks, but slips along planes of cleavage or gliding, a movement of ions in one layer over another in a tensile stressed crystal. The faulting, the dice as they fall, of the tongue from my grasp, with a pen in its writing or copying, spalma, in fact from the Greek spalen, to air, and miraculously unconnected either to fallen, German to drop, or fallere, Latin, to deceive, to miss the mark, to love you, to make a wager. The hollow of a vessel, bowl or drinking vessel. The hollow of the waves, the breast, the depths. A sinus trims the border with a chyma. The seach foams the border of the bay. A search forms the order of its fines. Above the iris, a cataract attracts a glaucal mist. A fine spray of the drew from the falls scrims the vista with wisps. Cascade descends straight from cascare to fall, a synonym of cadere, from casus, an accident, a chance event, all miraculously unrelated to the Spanish cascade, to shatter, to break into pieces, the result of an accident, from which cast, from caesere, to strike, from casus, hollow, empty, devoid. So the cask anticipates the crash from its fall, the shatter already before the slip, its telos and shards and shared forms. The swell of a curtain from irregular currents curtails. Hail hastily gavels the concrete in a rapt tattoo. Dry pellets pelt the petals to the pave. They scatter in brief, rebounding Brownian bounce. The ice as it falls, the onding in passing. The span and collapse, the mermaid, the one gift. The stifle and puzzle, embarrass, perplexing. If you would have come to meet me, I would have run toward you on the platform right next to the track. I would have done everything so as not to fall. But the body itself opens the chasm into which it falls away from itself. A catapult projecting the ground on which it founds and founders in its tumble. The spread and the splatter, the links, the farragonous interminable frozen sound, the rink run of inlets and sloughs, the terminal velocities attained, friction's equivalent of fluid drag balances, the slow exuvial slough, gloss drops depend in a frozen drip from the whitewashed platform, rust leaching in spots and breaching the bleach. The scaffold, the lattice, the framework, the catafalque, the downward sickling sweep of the falx and reap, the pentacled skull in a forward arc propels from occipital weight. The mean part of the dura mater divides and descends. The marteling peen, the sickening smack of the skeletal impact, the weight of the matter, the cut of the deck, the crack of cement, the concrete, the fact, the momentous, the met, some sharp edge of a platform. The whole in slow motion, a crushing blow, a heavy stroke, the held at bay. The cades, the cadeau, the cascade, the baled to bay, the fated to fail, the structures crushed to a fine granulation, the dust to a plush, the pills to a powder, the pulver, the pollen, the dander and villi, every last grain to the ground, the molars, incisors, and canines, the vaginal process, the jugular fossa, the mastoid, each down on the lip, the lashes. Leaves weave a lacework lattice on the grass. An intricate figure of expected, unpredictable scatter traces a Persian carpet of the probable in the strew and spread of statistical pattern. The stochastic, clastic, distributed plot postulates its own hypothesis. Then, the compulsory crush. The pestle of steps, the must of the crumble, the dust of dried sage between fingers, the linear, persistent, acerose sting of the sudden conclusion arrives at the end of some long-held opinion. La tige fluette, the fluid, the flood, those threaded sleeves that leak, the pipes that link, the sink of blood. Between the seas and these tear waters, scant difference. Acanthus curls over itself, wrought branches fraught with virgin leaves, wasps sklent to scent the caltrops' nectar, alighting. Stems slender and spreading, the plant's blossoms powder under lanceolate whorls of bracts and inflorescent umbrils. The systole columns sustain their close companionship. They stand too close and yet refrain from touching. The corrective entasis deceives, the unseen curvatures perjure, beguile, and charm. Hair down, waving and helical from the least humidity, everything loosened and looking so undone, she echoes, the mermaid, the one gift, the bridge is failing. With undulate pulses, medusae sink and swell, they taper down like ink let into water. Where a droplet sinks while still suspended to the surface by some tension attenuates, it flutters to shape medusoid vortices of various graded forms. The threads suspend, the cupellate shoot ribbons, the little bell begins to ring. We think of the bubbles in a liquid as rising, while forgetting that they simply mean some other particles are falling to take their place. But rather than speaking of a synthesis of rising and falling, one should speak of a continuity of the aesthetic form that does not allow itself to be disrupted by the borderlines that separate rising from falling. The new lover arrived from everywhere then. The new lover departing everywhere hence. A spondy, a dactyl, 3 trochees. On some cool morning, one finds the petals of a moth orchid morbid in the pot. The wasps to cold are lost. The fever by degrees. The rains fell in divisions between downs. Shadows are the spells cast by luminance. From the cut to brushed cinnabar to desiccated yarrow, the osteoman's leaves heat-cracked scapula as the sortilege abandons cast plastrons in middens. The cluster of the stones, the parceled by lots, the throws, the thrones, the forecast rains tomorrow or some other day at some uncertain hour, the drawn, the drained to bay, the clouded over lower, the roe deer fallow with the field's burnished edge, dusk along the margin of the wood. The should of the derivative, the shide of the lance from the hand, the slide of the tide from the shingle, the cast of the timber, the tumbled autumnal in turn. The faltering grip of the late leaves' caducity, compulsory, gives. The runes, the sluice, the thorns and edges and yolks and ashes, the winds of the branches exposed to the wind. Bare rocks outcrop from the tree line to the rim. Ochre scrope oak scumbles the slope. Gabled firs comb a scrim above the rust blush of dry blush maple. Intercalated birch dispersed in mustard dustings trim. Green still lingers in the basin, screening the creek. Within weeks, powder from these boughs and periodic veils unfurls diaphanous sheets. For now, afternoon sun on spruce bleaches blue as a snow coat, even in autumn. Broom flowers waver over the swales weep. The mist, the plumbed, the slumber, seasonal rates darken and densen. A wake of grain eddies down the lathes. Rain streaks stretch the length of the window, counterfeiting prison bars. The solemn drops unfurl and assume. Their carceral architecture simulates in silence. A violence stimulates the plicature, which scars. At minute intervals, the ombographic panes record the rate. Rain doesn't form the only hyphen between sky and soil. Lenticulated drops bead from stratified rocks. The ground shows an interest in shadows which cannot own it, but are nonetheless holden. The sleevings surface grain. The fell of the pelt displays follicle patterns. The pulse patter slows to a gradual halt. The atmosphere condenses on the glass. The context presses as the day passes. The carcels drop away along the focal plane at calculated rates. With asynchronous hesitations, the parcel droplets race, staining as they clear along parallel tracks of sprint and stall the record of their peers. The felt of the pell, the patter of the pulp, the melt of the matter, the cease of the held, the gradual halt, the lot, the duty, the task, the streets, the falls, the roofs, the gins and brikes, the plaster and fractures from the stress, the plaster and wraps, arrest settles to set the break for the slip from the tripped. The sinking church is flooded by the lake. Abreast, aboard, astern, the out, the off, the in with, the onto deaf ears, the lease due, the pleats down, the lace, the please, the implored, the misted gaze, the lees between rains, the overcast smoothed against fray, the felt. A modest bodice gauze ruffs from neck to gorge, draperies and paintings dispose with artful disarray, the piping, the ribbon enriddled, rose crimped from the shearing cascade with a ribboning trim. The strips and folds, the form of the fluid, the cut of the rivel, a ridge of felt seams in their ranks, a lapped inflorescence of ruche in its waves, the rhythmic flow of the wove as it hangs, the intervention of a robe arranged. Soft satin-backed silk of crêpe météor makes a curtaining undulate drape. The broken, the braid, the brocades, the stays to the flanks, the stoppages, blind-stitched and metered, the fate in reserve. A needle dropped on a wooden floor lands between planks with predictable play. Calculary lots clot accountable lacunar gaps. the rasp of a thimble, a throw of the dice, anything temporal. The slow approach of the dusk, crepuscular, precurses diminution for this beautiful day. And then the disastrous, constellated crash of the stars, the heavy stroke, the crushing blow, the stones are dropped by the tide's retreat. The cathedral founders, engloutis, engloutis, swallowed by the billow of the lake. This morning, the swale, drained, descant, decanted. The plagial cadence in a long decay, with a held sustain, with a tempo grave, amabile, suave, più. The staves of the cave, the cadeau, the cascades, the frozen sound in this endless suspension, the trust in an echo. Arches in series, diminished down, vanishing avenues, ravishing. With only thorns to adorn their bush branches, roses and lines aligned. As lope the days, as leap the eaves. The seas with leisurely seizures sheave lacquering, saline-sized heaves and slack measures. The infamous difference between oceans and tears. The desperate sentiments and serious aches, the cake of the sediments, certain evaporates, all of the salts. The air to the ground to halt, the lowest place, the connate water, the fossil sea, the cognate, complacent. A crystal text, a petrified shell. A stone on which reflected light plays. A stone from the surface of which the sun was reflected. The play of the glare on a rock, a prisming crystal. The light from everywhere, always obliquely. The comfort of knowing that everything else is also beholden to laws we cannot yet explain. Not so much a pull, perhaps, as a kind of thickening of space, a slight lessening of a glowing, slowing in its passage, gravity and waves with the natural wake of a gate, the tilt and the pivot and pitch. One consequence of a Lorentz invariance played out. Two spheres from a tower in Pisa. The essence of sculpture. An alleged name for a covey of flight. The sun to the horizon, daily, it seems. Each beautiful day is also a meteor. And now love, trying to tell us what science has always kept saying, what all physics comes down to, everything, everywhere, falls, about one's ears, to pieces, apart, the far behind, the in together, the always short, the lack of the resin, the decadent conviction, a system's lemon, what little was left of our shed summer skin. When casual chance is taken as causal, happenstance change is seen as a symptom, and so the coincidence recurs, this time in Greek. Symptom comes down direct from symptoma, chance, accident, from patoma, a fall, a misfortune. The lovesick, still, the sill of a sleep, the cell of the page, the swallowed pills, the stake for a stroke as a pell. Clamped tight to the grillwork, the rusting bells clapper from peals to damping retires. The spires drop, engulfed in aspiring mirror. The perspective's reflection elongates inversely. There's a cathedral that descends and a lake that rises. Or, rather, continuities of form from forms of continuous borders conforming, confound. The summits in storm dissolve. A shattered, imschatten, askance, ashore. A chance, a cross, the fold and the rot, by rolling in pressure, with lees and with sighs, what lies, fibers open as a text in compression. In the drizzle at the bay's edge, from the fog along the shore, rainwater equates the piles of the pier. The marrow, the morn, the mere, the wan lunar decrements, the long-dropped quarrels, the scruples. From the bone to the yarrow to the throne, wasps dart among the catenach. The leaves of the sibyl scatter in the draught, a sibilant shimmer of aspens and quiver along the brank, their rachites branching, reaching, embarbed. The showers and shadows, their coincidence, a missile, a bowl, some other object, anything opaque. The gliding sink of the shafts in flight, the stochastic try, the chased, the knock, the bolts, the parabolic in their course, forgetting while calculating that the vertical vector is parsed independently. When the center of gravity is moved in a straight line, the limbs describe curves. Emotions, asymptotic intensity trails, tailing, a calculus of feelings over time. time independent of mass. Everything equally leveling falls, the escaped, the unclasped, the held and let slip, the no longer held, the missed and no longer beholden, the let down, the let go, the felt, the molten, the molted, the felled, and the folded. Felt understood as the past tense of fall, left as the past tense of leaf. The aroused, now recumbent, back to sleep, detumescent. The evening breeze falters. The event comes to fall. Hört Odermorgen oder den übernächsten Tag, to miss the mark, to love you, to come to pass, to this, today or tomorrow or some other day, in love, asleep. Chance, obliging, chooses the dancer, her stammers and tumbles, the rhythm of her steps, the broken, the cast. But you didn't, but I did. Sometime, I know, I will have to let this drop, today or tomorrow or some other. Chance is what falls due, what reaches its deadline. The randomness of dice, the risk of desire, the slip. For a while, we forget that we are never not falling. In love, as sleep, any day now, and it will still be fall.